Monks clearing their mind in seconds, without meditating, without sitting still, and without closing their eyes. You see a Tibetan monk standing at the entrance of a dim corridor, his breath steady but his face tight like his mind has begun to race. Instead of sitting to meditate, he lifts 2 fingers, taps his cheek once, shifts his gaze sharply to the left, and exhales in a short burst. His entire expression changes. Something inside him cuts. The noise disappears. In this video, you'll discover the techniques Tibetan monks use to clean the mind when there's no time to meditate. Methods built on sensory interruption, physical sweeping rituals, and a hidden vocal vibration strong enough to stop internal dialogue instantly. And this matters because most people wait until their mind is overwhelmed before trying to calm it, while monks prevent the spiral at the very first spark. I'm sharing this because I once believed mental clarity came from long meditation sessions, until monks showed me it comes from knowing how to interrupt the mind before it takes control. But the most surprising part is this. The fastest way monks silence thought isn't mental, it's physical. Monks understand something most people never realize. The mind doesn't stop because you meditate. The mind stops because something interrupts it at the exact moment it begins to run. Meditation is useful when the mind is already calm, but when thoughts are spiraling, when anxiety hits quickly, or when your brain starts looping stories you can't escape, meditation is too slow. In those moments, monks don't try to calm the mind. They break it. They interrupt the momentum before it turns into a storm. The first technique they use is the microsensory shock. A monk feels the first rise of mental noise and immediately gives a short, precise tap to the cheek, the forehead, or the side of the jaw. It's not a slap. It's not aggressive. It's a sharp sensory cue designed to snap attention out of the inner narrative and back into the body. The brain pauses for a fraction of a second. That pause is all the monk needs to stop a thought before it becomes a chain of thoughts. The second technique is ocular redirection. When the mind is spiraling, the eyes subtly freeze or lock onto a specific point. Monks use this as an early warning signal. As soon as they sense this freeze, they shift their gaze sideways or downwards in a single, deliberate movement. The sudden change in visual field disrupts the brain's predictive loop, collapsing the mental storyline forming in the background. It's not about seeing something new, it's about shocking the brain out of its internal pattern. Then there is split attention. Monks train themselves to divide their awareness instantly, half on the external world, half on the breath. This division prevents the mind from fully investing in the narrative it was about to build. Internal dialogue relies on a narrow tunnel-like focus. When the monk widens his attention, the dialogue cannot sustain itself. It collapses, like a rope pulled apart from both ends. These techniques come from the Tibetan concept of the cut point. The idea is simple. You don't control thoughts by chasing them. You control thoughts by severing the first one the moment it appears. A monk learns to feel that first spark, a tightening in the chest, a shift in the breath, a narrowing of the gaze, and he cuts it. The earlier the cut, the cleaner the mind becomes. There is also the sensory anchor, a method used when thoughts arrive too quickly. A monk touches something with strong texture, cold stone, rough fabric, wood grain, and focuses on the sensation for just one breath. This redirects the mind into the present moment without effort. The physical world becomes a landing point, pulling the monk out of the mental tunnel before it forms. Monks even use temperature as interruption. They dip 2 fingers into cold water and touch their neck or behind the ear. The sudden shift in temperature sends a jolt through the nervous system, breaking the mental rhythm instantly. It's not a punishment, it's a reset switch. The most surprising part is how quickly these methods work. While most people need several minutes of meditation to slow the mind, monks can interrupt thought in a single second. They know that the mind is like a river. If you try to stop it once it's rushing, you'll drown. But if you interrupt the flow at the first ripple, the river never forms. These anti-thought techniques give monks the upper hand in moments of stress, frustration, or anxiety. But interruption is only the first half. Once they stop thought, they perform something even more unusual, using the body itself to sweep the mind clean, removing the leftover tension that would otherwise create new thoughts moments later. Once a monk has interrupted the first spark of thought, he doesn't rely on the mind to finish the job. He uses the body. Tibetan monks believe that mental noise doesn't just exist in the head, it settles into the muscles, breath, and posture. If you don't clear it physically, it returns within seconds. So instead of meditating, they perform a brief ritual that looks simple from the outside but resets the nervous system instantly. It begins with the hand sweep. A monk lifts one hand and moves it slowly from the forehead down to the chest, then from the chest to the lower abdomen. It is not symbolic, it is neurological. The movement activates sensory nerves across the front of the body, interrupting the tension patterns that mental spirals create. As the hand passes each region, the muscles underneath soften and the breath deepens without effort. This downward sweep tells the nervous system release. Next comes the neck reset. Thoughts often trigger subtle contractions along the sides of the neck, tightening the jaw and locking the shoulders. A monk places 2 fingers at the base of the skull and drags them down the neck in a short, firm stroke. This releases the small muscles that connect the spine to the skull, the very muscles that stiffen when internal dialogue accelerates. The moment they relax, thought loses momentum. After this, monks use friction. They rub their palms together quickly until heat gathers between them, then place the warm hands over the face or chest. This warmth calms the vagus nerve, slowing the stress response and grounding attention back into the body. The warmth acts like a manual override for the mind, telling it to stand down. Breath is added in fragments. Instead of a full inhale, the monk breathes in 2 steps. Half, pause, half, and then lets the exhale fall naturally. Fragmenting the breath disrupts the rhythm that the narrative mind depends on. Internal dialogue needs a smooth, uninterrupted breathing pattern to grow. When the breath is split, the verbal loop collapses. The mind stutters, then goes quiet. There is also a shoulder release used when thoughts feel heavy. A monk lets his shoulders rise just slightly, then drops them with a loose exhale. The drop activates a reflex in the spine that signals safety to the brain. When the shoulders fall, the mind follows. Tension drains from the upper body, and with it the mental residue that was clinging to the system. One of the most unusual parts of the ritual is the chest brush. A monk spreads his fingers and brushes across the chest from center to shoulder in a single outward motion. This movement stimulates nerves that regulate heart rhythm and breathing depth. When done correctly, the chest opens subtly, the breath becomes smoother, and the mind clears as if fog has lifted. These movements take less than 10 seconds, but their impact is immediate. The body resets its posture, the breath resets its pattern, the nervous system resets its signals. Thought cannot survive in a system that has been physically reorganized. What began as a mental interruption becomes a full nervous system reset. But there is still one more layer, something even more powerful than physical motion. Because when a monk's mind is truly caught, when the noise rises too fast or too intensely, he uses a final technique, not movement, not breath, a sound, a short hidden vibration that can cut through thought like a blade. When all other methods fail, when the mind is running too fast, when anxiety hits too sharply, when the internal voice becomes louder than breath or posture, monks use a technique almost no one outside their tradition knows. A single sound, not a mantra, not a chant, not a sacred syllable. It is a short, sharp vocal vibration designed to stun the mind and silence thought in the exact moment it refuses to stop. The sound is created in the throat, not the mouth. A monk inhales softly through the nose, gathers a tiny pocket of air in the upper throat, and releases it in a sudden, controlled burst. It is not loud, it is not meant to be heard by others. It's closer to a contained kurmoro, or hen, a vibration shaped more by the closure of the glottis than by the lips or tongue. The vibration hits the chest and skull from the inside, like a small internal shock. The effect is immediate. Internal dialogue depends on rhythm, on a smooth chain of micro-muscle movements in the larynx and breath pattern. This sharp vibration interrupts that rhythm at its root. The verbal stream collapses. For a moment there is only silence, a gap, a break wide enough for clarity to return. Monks use this sound in moments of saturation, when many thoughts collide at once, when emotion surges, or when the mind refuses to obey gentler methods. The vibration cuts through everything because it comes from the same place inside the throat that the inner voice uses to silently speak. In other words, the sound hijacks the machinery that creates thought. The vibration also affects the vagus nerve. As the sound pulses downward into the chest, it triggers a quick drop in heart rate and tension. The nervous system shifts from urgency to presence, muscles soften, breath slows. This physiological shift reinforces the mental break, making it deeper and more stable. Monks often describe the experience as dropping the mind. For a split second, the thinking machinery shuts off completely. What comes after is not emptiness. It is clarity, like water settling after a stone is thrown in. The mind no longer pushes, it no longer runs, it simply rests. There is also a psychological component. The sudden sound interrupts the sense of continuity that internal dialogue relies on. The story breaks. The identity attached to that story dissolves for a moment. The monk steps outside the narrative and into direct awareness. This shift doesn't require effort or concentration, It happens automatically because the vibration interrupts both the physical and cognitive structure of thought. Some monks combine the sound with a quick downward gaze, amplifying the interruption. Others pair it with a small exhale through the nose. But the core remains the same, a sharp, precise vibration that breaks the mental loop from the inside. Used properly, this technique can stop a spiral that would normally last hours. It is not meant to replace meditation, but to give monks a tool for moments when meditation is impossible during work, during conflict, during emotional overwhelm. It is the fastest way they know to wipe the mind clean. And when the mind has been cut, swept, and silenced, what remains is not emptiness, but space. Space where clarity can grow, where breath becomes easy, and where thought no longer dominates the moment. Monks don't wait for peace to appear. They create it, not by fighting the mind or forcing it to be silent, but by understanding how thought begins and how to interrupt it before it takes over. They know that meditation is powerful, but it is slow, and life doesn't always give you the space to sit, breathe, and wait for clarity. So they developed another path, a practical one, sharp and immediate. They cut the first spark of thought before it becomes a flame. They use the body to sweep tension away so the mind has nothing to cling to. They use vibration to break the internal voice at its source. Each technique is small. Each one takes only a second. But together, they give monks control over the moments when most people lose themselves. These methods remind us that clarity isn't something you earn after hours of practice. It is something you access when you know how to interrupt the momentum of your mind. The body can reset the mind, a breath can collapse a narrative, a sound can silence an entire storm of thoughts. Monks use these tools daily, not as rituals of spirituality, but as maintenance, like cleaning a room before dust becomes a burden. You may never live in a monastery or learn the full discipline of their training, but these principles remain universal. Interrupt early, reset physically, silence sharply, and let the mind fall back into its natural stillness. Peace is not far away. It is always one interruption away. That is how monks clean the mind without meditation. Not by escaping thought, but by cutting it at the root.